You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the Chris Voss Show.com, the Chris Voss Show.com. Hey, we're excited to have you guys come tune in the show. We've got a most excellent author. And, of course, we have, you might have heard this a couple times when you've been on the show. We have all the greatest authors in the world on the show. We just put it in the Google machine and we say, hey, what are the most brilliant authors? And only the most brilliant authors show up on the show. The ones who aren't brilliant, they don't show up on the show. So just keep that in mind when you're on amzn.com /shop/Chris Voss, seeing all the great books and ordering them there. You can do that as well. So welcome to the show, folks. You can also go to thecvpn.com or for your friends, neighbors, relatives, online podcast. To see the video version of this show, you can go to youtube.com /Chris Voss. Hit the bell notification button. Also, find me on Goodreads. You can see the different reviews we put up for books that we read, and some of the books that we're currently reading. A lot of the people that are on the show are on there as well. And also, we have a book club we're trying to build over there. So find me under Chris Voss at goodreads.com. You can find the show's newest syndication, Amazon Music. You can find the podcasts on there as well. Today, we have a most excellent guest with us. She is the author of the book and a multitude of books we'll talk about, Cassandra Speaks: When Women Are the Storytellers, the Human Story Changes. Elizabeth Lesser is on the show. Let me go through her bio real quick here. She is the author of several best-selling books, including Broken Open, How Difficult Times Can Help Us Grow, and Morrow, Love, Loss, and What Matters the Most. Her newest book, Cassandra Speaks, is released September 15th. This is brand new, just came out. She's a co-founder of Omega Institute, recognized internationally for its workshops and conferences in wellness, spirituality, creativity, and social change. She's given 2 popular TED Talks and is one of Oprah Winfrey's Super Soul 100. There you go. A collection of 100 leaders who are using their voices and talent to elevate humanity, which is what we love to do here on the show. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm really happy to be with you. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to be with you, too. Oprah Winfrey Super Soul 100. Oh, my gosh. We're going to learn a lot today, aren't we?
Maybe.
Maybe? All right. Well, hopefully we do. So you've got this wonderful book. Give us the plugs on your internet places.coms where people can find you.
Yeah, my own website is elizabethlesser.org. My organization, Omega Institute, is the letter E, omega.org. That's where you can find me, and Facebook and Instagram and all those things.
Awesome. So what motivated you want to write this book? You've written several books. Can you tell us how many exactly?
This is my 4th.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My first book, The Seeker's Guide, I was aware from this conference center and retreat center that I lead, or used to, I co-founded, like for thousands of years, religion kept people able to search for some sort of meaning about what the heck are we doing here as human beings. But as religion, especially in America, began to lose its grip, although you may not know that at the moment, this new kind of American spirituality is what I called it, diverse, democratic, this idea that we don't have to adhere to a religion to be self-aware, good human beings. So my first book, The Seeker's Guide, was about that. How do you have, quote-unquote, spiritual life without religion? And second book, Broken Open, is about how it seems for us human beings, difficult times is what helps us grow. We have to go through traumas to change our intractable, bizarre behavior. we all do that, you know. Before my cancer, I was a jerk. Before my divorce, I didn't know how to be with the opposite sex, you know. So that's what that book's about. My third book, Marrow, I was my sister's bone marrow donor. And we used it as an opportunity not just to become close through our blood, but also to become closer as friends. It's about that journey we took. And then this last book, Cassandra Speaks, is about the lack of women's values and voices throughout the ages. I went back into the ancient myths, the Bible stories, starting with Eve, how women were second born but first to sin. And that kind of sticks to women and men and the way we think about who women are. I wanted to unpack those stories and imagine what it would have been like if there'd been other storytellers involved.
So, so you write in the book several different stories, and you kind of take this sort of thinking apart, right? Well, give us an overview of what the stories are in the book.
Well, the book's divided into 3 parts. The first I call origin stories. And so obviously some of the origin stories that have formed the way we think as human culture are Bible stories, Greek myths, some of our earliest literature, and then more modern literature, movies, just the story. You know, humans learn through stories. That's how we learn. Parables and hero journey stories. We learn what it means to be a valid human being through stories. Second part of the book, I go into the story of power and kind of the formative books and ways we think about what does it mean to be a powerful person? What is power anyway? How do you get it? How do you use it? And the last part of the book I call Writing Brave New Endings. And it's a toolbox of ways of strengthening our voices. This is primarily for women, but I know a lot of men who have enjoyed the book too.
Yeah, it seems like a really interesting book as I went through it. I like the toolbox at the end too, because you not only lay the foundation with the stories and everything, but you give people, it's like, here's how to make this work. So how about if we start off with the title, Cassandra Speaks. There's a story behind this. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah. Cassandra, I didn't really know much about Cassandra until I started researching. And it stuck in me so much, I made it the title of the book. Cassandra was the most beautiful princess in ancient Greece, in Troy. And Troy and Greece were enemies. And Cassandra was the most eligible princess, and all the dudes were after her, including the gods. Zeus was after her, king of the gods, and Zeus's son Apollo. And Apollo wooed her by promising her the gift of clairvoyance, that she'd be able to see into the future, predict the future. And she wanted that. I'd like that. If somebody promised me that, I'd say, okay. But he didn't tell her that what went along with that was he was going to have sex with her. And so she accepted the gift, and then she didn't want to have sex with him, so he was furious. And as the story goes, he spat in her mouth a curse. And that was, you will still be clairvoyant. I'm not going to take it away from you, but no one will believe your predictions. And so she did predict everything. She predicted the Trojan War. She predicted all of her family dying. She predicted the sacking of her city and the destruction of her land. And nobody believed her. And it drove her crazy. It drove her mad at the end of the story. And
I can't blame her. I'd be mad too.
Yeah, well, that's why a lot of women are mad. And as I was writing the book, it was right in the middle of the Me Too uprising. Mm-hmm. And I decided to call the book Cassandra Speaks after I watched the televised trial of all the young athletes who had been abused by Dr. Larry Nassar. You know, all the gymnasts, including many Olympic gymnasts who for years had told their parents and their coaches and the U.S. Olympic Committee, this guy is abusing us, hundreds of them, and no one believed them. And then at the trial, which they televised, the wonderful Judge Aquilina, she allowed each girl to tell her story. 125 young women told their story, and she made the doctor listen to each one. And it was to me that these Cassandras were speaking, and they were being heard, and they were being believed. And that became the core of the book for me.
Is the mistake in, I remember watching that, and the extraordinary thing was how long it went on and so many victims. And is the issue that you talk about in the book is that we don't listen to women individually as enough, or do more women need to come together and speak out as one? Because that's what really happened that's what really pushed the Me Too movement, was enough people came out with their horror stories. And I was surprised by it too as a man, because I don't approach things maybe in the same way. Even though I've dated a lot of my life, I don't send pictures to women. I guess I have some weird thing. If I want to go out with a girl on a date, I ask her on a date. If she says no, that's it. But maybe it's because I've dated so many women that I kind of just, and I know, there's certain things you don't talk about or do to women and stuff. But when I saw the monsters coming out with, all the different ugly things that people were doing, I was just like, wow. And so them speaking out as a group helps. So I'm sorry, I went a little long on the tooth, but back to my original answer, her question was, is it an individual thing, or is it a group thing, or both? Maybe, I don't know.
I think it's both, and I think it's complicated. I don't think it's a black and white thing. All women good, all men bad, or all women have been oppressed, all men are oppressors. That's not what the book is about. What I'm more interested in is that the values that our culture has put forward as these are the values to follow have mostly been created by men, because men have been the leaders, whether it's because of biology and kind of the brawny nature and the domineering spirit, and women being in the home taking care of the kids, or maybe it's estrogen and testosterone. It doesn't really matter to me anymore the why of it. I feel women have something in our makeup, in our hearts, our priorities that the world needs now. We've had thousands of years of male-dominated leadership. Some of it's been great and cool and wonderful, inventive, and, we got so much from that. But it's sort of, in my opinion, run its course, and we need a more inclusive, gentler, kinder definition of what leadership and power mean. And I feel women have that in us, and it's time for that to be equally valued. And that's why I'm interested in women becoming leaders, not just so we can have 50-50. I'm interested in what we have inside of us, bringing it out, no longer having it be like, well, that's good in the kindergarten classroom or the nurse. But no, I want to dignify what women carry inside of us.
And I would agree with you. I think men can learn a lot from women, because you guys do a lot of things right, and we're kind of messed up in our own little world. There's a reason we're kind of different, is the anime and what we bring to I guess Mother Nature is a difference there. But there's definitely benefits we can learn from each other. And I remember years ago I went to this play, and it's a famous play that's toured around, and it's about the cavemen and cave women thing, the hunter-gatherer sort of experience.
Right.
And I think, like you say, there was probably a reason in medieval times or earlier times when we lived in a society where maybe there were certain roles that were necessary. I mean, certainly you couldn't send women into battle with swords and 50 pounds of metal gear to fight medieval whatever, and some of that stuff was probably male created also.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. But now we live in a very different time, and we don't have to deal with that. Women can do a lot of stuff that men can do, et cetera. So they always could, but it's I don't have to worry about my girlfriend being attacked by some medieval horseman when she goes to the store. I don't have to worry about that as like maybe 300,000-400,000 years or whatever. But you talk about a lot of how the literature that's out there kind of maybe pre-programs or kind of creates walls around women or expectations that they feel they have to live up to. Like, for instance, Eve in the Bible. If you want to discuss that.
Yeah. Well, with apologies to any Bible literalists listening, I don't know who your audience is. Eve, everything was so cool and groovy in the Garden of Eden. It was just Adam and God, and everything was great. There was no sickness. There wasn't even death. It was just heaven, paradise, Garden of Eden. And then God went and created woman to be a helpmate for Adam, and everything went downhill. She listened to the snake, who said, "Oh no, you can eat that apple. You'll become wise if you eat that apple. You'll become mature and grown up. Go ahead, eat it." So she did. And that was the end of the Garden of Eden, and they were exiled, and the fall. Everything fell from there. Now there's lots of heroes in the Bible. There's Noah and Job, and there's Abraham, and there's Jesus, and all of these men actually disobeyed the culture. They all went their separate ways. They all left home. They all had to go on the hero's journey, which always includes leaving home, being tested, and then becoming mature and grown up, hopefully, through our problems. Eve is the only protagonist in the Bible who is punished for following that same urge to become wise. I look at Eve as the first grown-up in the garden. Adam was just like, "Oh, it's cool, I like it here, God's filling the refrigerator, I'm fine." But Eve was like, "No, I want to be wise. I want to grow up." So she left, and Adam went with her, and she's punished, and women have worn that cloak of born second, first to sin. And there's lots of stories in lots of different cultures where that same trope is laid out. There's something fundamentally untrustworthy about women.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. I grew up in religion, and I always used to ask the question because I was that jerk. Like at 3 years old, I was asking questions.
Me too.
People were like,
"Don't call it a jerk. You weren't a jerk. You were curious and smart."
Yeah, there you go. And I would ask, well, how come the women can't get the priesthood? Like, why not? Because they need to make quilts. They're the women. And I'm like, but like, why? I mean, I used to call it the penishood because I'm like, basically, that's really the difference as to why they can't have it and we can't, and we have it. But still, like, I don't see what the big deal is. Like, and then just be like, shut up, have some faith. But at becoming an atheist, and I try to be a good atheist. In fact, I if I ask myself value questions, I go, what would Jesus do? Even though I don't believe the Bible is a factual historical record of accuracy. In fact, if anything, I adhere to as a fact of fiction, but a work of fiction. But I'm respectful of other people. Look, I understand life is hard, and I understand life is challenging. If that's what you need to hold on to, as long as you don't hurt anybody else or push your beliefs on anybody else, rock it, have fun.
Exactly, I'm with
you. You got to hold on to. I'm going to hold on to my atheist. But what I studied from that experience of growing up in religion was the Eve story. And I've spent a lot of time looking at that, probably not as much as you have, but some of it, and gone, why is that story used? Because I see a lot of stuff in religion and Bibles is there's a lot of good, like, stuff, like positive stuff, like, don't steal from people. But the Eve story, it even starts out it even starts out treating Eve as a second-class citizen, and that's what I always call women in religion. I go, religion really treats women, in my opinion, like second-class citizens, and it starts from that thing that man was created first, and then his rib is taken out. So women get left over with the residual, which is a horrible story, in my opinion. And then then there's the Eve story, and even talking with some of the religious leaders that we've had on that have written books that have been calling out white nationalism and sexism and some of the different things in the church, racism, they've talked about that, how that Eve story has just been the thing that, they used to beat women over the heads for so many years in religion. And like you say, you look at the leaders of religious organizations and they're always men. In fact, some of them are filled with a lot of gay men, which is kind of interesting how they demonize.
There's a lot of stuff about sex in there, and fear of sex and hatred of sex and hatred of their own body and fear of pleasure, and it's not a good worldview, if you ask me. And as you say, some of it's wonderful and beautiful and instructive, and I don't hate religion. I take the parts I like and try to rewrite the parts I don't, because they were made up by people, so we can change them and make up whatever we want to guide us.
So when little girls grow up and they read that, because this is something I've given thought to, how does that, it's kind of like if you're African American and you watch movies and TV, and the good guy is always a white guy, the bad guy is always a black guy. I imagine women see a lot of these stories that you talk about in the book from that angle, where they're like, well, I guess everything is my fault.
Yeah, and even if you don't formulate it in actual words in your head, even if you think, I wasn't raised on those stories and I don't believe those stories, I'm free of those stories. No, it's kind of in our DNA, and it does affect girls and women. And it affects us. It isn't just a religious thing. Like if you say to a girl, let's say, wow, you're a little tomboy. Girls feel proud. I was told I was a tomboy as a girl, and I always felt cool about that, But if you tell a boy you're a sissy, you're a mama's boy, what does that make a boy feel like? What would that make you feel like, Chris?
It's quite the opposite. We feel offended. We feel like we need to increase our masculinity.
Right. So what does that tell a little girl, that a boy would never want to be like you, but you'd like to be like a boy? And then it goes on, especially if you get into the work world, you got to man up even as a woman. If you go into a meeting and you're frustrated and upset and you cry, that is bad. That can affect your whole job. You have to do like the guys. You have to do the locker room talk. You have to be stoic. You got to swallow it. And that's hard for men, but it's really hard for women, especially if while we stuff our natural inclinations, you're not getting the best of us. The best of me as a woman, and not all women are like this, but most women, I would say, the best of me has a lot to do with creating community, a feeling of belonging, empowering someone else, not being the person who can't ask for directions or who doesn't want anybody else's opinion. Like look at what's happening in the world now. The 5 countries that dealt the best with COVID are all led by women. Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, her TV appearances to her country were so full of vulnerability and requests for help, and we're in this together. It wasn't pitting anyone against anybody else. That is, if a woman can lead from her essential nature, she would do it like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. And it's really hard for women who get into leadership positions. You've got to swallow your true authenticity.
And I think you're right. I mean, there's been a lot of great books written about this. I think Lean In by the Facebook gal, Sandra?
Sanders.
Yeah.
It's crazy I'm not remembering.
I'm not happy at the rest of how Facebook deals with everything, but you know, it was a good book, and a lot of women really liked it. But you speak with a lot of different stories to the first part. You've got part one, the origin stories, Eve, Pandora. She's got the whole world in her hand. Listening to Cassandra, the spell of Galatia. Galatea. I flunked Greek history or wherever that comes from. I flunked everything. The greatest books, Know Her Name, and Leaving the Cave. And so you tell all of these as, I guess, sort of a metaphor to help people kind of understand some of these stories and expectations, or way people maybe reflect on themselves.
Yeah. And also, you know, we're seeing this right now with the whole, what's going on with race in our country. Like, there's a story in America that allowed us to enslave people. And that story was white supremacy. It just is at the core of America. You know, it's like, how else could you rip people from their homeland and beat them into subservience? You'd have to believe in a story of that white people are better and black people are there to serve us. If you don't know that story, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of other people. So we have to know our story as Americans. And I think for women and men to know these old stories and to know that Eve still lives in us, Galatea, which is the story of the sculptor Pygmalion, thought all women were dirty. Their bodies were full of sin. And he just didn't want anything to do with them. And he decided to be celibate. And he locked himself in his studio and started building a statue of a gorgeous woman.
Wow.
And the gods were so pleased with him for finally creating a pure Madonna-type woman who had no sin, that they had her come to life. And she was Galatea. And I feel women carry with us that idea that there's something wrong with our body. We're not supposed to want pleasure. We have to look a certain way. We have to be tiny and thin and quiet. And if we're not that, you know, women carry a lot of shame in our bodies. And that old story really helped me. I got to see, like, wow, this has been going on a long time, that women have been, you know, held up as, on the one hand, we're the Madonna, and on the other hand, there's something like wrong about our bodies. So I like knowing the old stories. They make me feel not so alone or like it's all my fault.
I would agree with you too. Like, I had some Muslim friends, and one of my friends, she told me one time about how when they go to church, if she's on her period, she's deemed as disgusting, filth, you know, all these horrible
Correct.
words. And she's not allowed to pray. They let them go to church, but there's like a special section for them in the back, and it's buried. And over my time of being an atheist, I've really studied this. And I know most of your book isn't about religion and all that sort of good stuff, but it's about some of these stories and some of these belief systems that we have. And I was just blown away. I'm like, really? And she was fine with it. She was cool, but I'm like, why do you accept that? Because to me, what all of our bodies do, I mean, there's not a lot of pretty things all of us don't do as a human body, but you know, that's who we are as humans. We just go, okay, well, you know, that's how humans work. You know, that's what, I mean, women, whatever women are going through, they bring forth life. They bring forth human life. Without them, our species would go dead. I mean, we're screwed if we lose women and women's ability to reproduce. We're just like, yeah, it's over, man. And
yeah,
so,
I once proposed to someone. I'd gone through the walk in Central Park and noticed how most of the statues, all of the statues, were men, either war generals or soldiers. One young soldier carrying a bleeding other soldier in World War I, and World War II statues, and General Sherman on a golden horse, and everything was about war and warriors. And I said something to someone associated with the park. I'm like, hey, why don't you have a statue of a woman giving birth and the baby coming out and blood? And they were like, that's disgusting. I'm like, well, why is it not disgusting to have a statue of a bleeding guy who's dying and a statue of a bleeding woman who's giving life? Like, I'm not saying we should do this, but don't you see the irony here that we like worship death?
Mm-hmm.
What is that all about? Why is almost every statue all over the world of warriors? Well,
Yeah.
I don't understand. Do you?
Well, it's a male-dominant society that goes back to the military. I think maybe the best way I could describe it is a few years ago, I actually sat down and looked at the photo of the congressional thing. I'm like, why do we have all these wars? Why we spent $8 trillion or something like that in Iraq. We're a broke country now. Most people don't realize, in debt, and war after war. And I started looking at the congressional leaders, and I'm like, oh man, it's a bunch of white guys like me. I'm from in the club. I know what's going on. I'm calling from the house. I know how we are. And hopefully I've become a little bit more enlightened over the years and less toxic masculinity. But I looked at that picture and I went, that's not how America looks. That should be 50% women, and it should be a mix of people. It's all white. So in 2018, before the election, I started pounding the book, my social media, and to my audience and stuff, that I'm voting all female. And the reason I'm doing that is because women are more introspective than men. They have more empathy than men. They can multitask better than men. They can multitask. Men can't really multitask. They can do so much more, and they care about children. They care about education. They care about the future. I know how men are. We're just like, hey, we got to make some money and we got to fight that. That's how yeah, let's go do that. You know how we are.
You should go on my book tour. Could you please go on my book tour?
Sure.
Let's go on this together. I need your voice in this.
It's true. I mean, I just know I know how we are. But so I voted all women down the ticket, and I said I'm voting 100%. I think I published my ballot, and I've talked about this before. Even like judges and stuff. Like even if they didn't have a party, I was like, yeah, all women, just women. And we elected in Nevada the largest legislature of women that
Yes,
would
you
ever been elected.
did. Yes, you did.
I don't know if it was just me, but I was talking about it, so maybe I helped. But that legislative body has been created some of the best things that I've ever seen come out of a legislature, in my opinion. Education, women's health care, everything for the future of Nevada. They're not sitting around in Nevada going, who can we start a war with? This kind of crap. They're doing stuff about the future. Women care about children. There's a reason women are the caretakers of children, because men are good at, we're good at going out and
Do you
clothing
think
things.
men can learn how to be good at it? Now, women, women learned stuff we just did not know. I felt it in my own life when I started entering the business world, and I had to start looking at spreadsheets and thinking about budgets. It was like the gears going like this. And I wanted to, though. I needed to have a job. Do you think men can want and need to change enough so that, and they can stop caring that it's emasculating to become more emotionally intelligent? And do you think men can? Do you think they will?
I think men can and will if they're willing. Like you say, we can all learn new skills. I think there will be some limits to men, though. There's something innate in women's brains that make you guys multitask. I don't think we can ever learn that. I mean, I think that's something you guys that's genetic to you guys. We just suck at multitasking.
Well, my husband is a good case in point. He ended up, when his son was 4, he became his main parent. He got divorced and he was the main parent. And he said that the sort of enforced intimacy and the having to both work and parent and do everything at the same time just felt so painful and difficult. But over the years, he had to develop some skills that included multitasking and the things that women have had to develop because of the roles we were put into for nature or nurture, I don't care, whatever. I think men could. If men, there's that joke, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change.
It's possible. I could be wrong. I don't know.
What if you decided that the very best thing is to be more caring and to multitask? Like, that's it, man. That's what makes a hero. I'm going to learn that. Maybe you could.
I don't know. Now the caring part, the empathy, the being more human, getting in touch with the what some people call the feminine side, but sometimes they use that as a looking down term. But getting into that more yin and yang feminine part of your side, getting
the
more,
feeling function.
The feeling function. And I think we can get there. I think we can get a lot of stuff. One of the other things I think that women have that men don't have is you guys have a microscopic molecular look at dirt and you guys can see stuff that we can't see.
Bullshit. I call bullshit.
Really?
I don't want to see that stuff. I've had to see that stuff.
But you can
so
see
I
it.
know
We
how.
can't.
Yes, you can.
No, I
That's
gotta
a
tell you.
cop out. Clean that toilet.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it's a focus thing that we just need to learn to focus. But
you don't want to. Who would want to?
Well, I don't know. I've had girlfriends sit down with me and I go, "Can you see that there?" And I go, "I can't." What are you? And I've been trying, and I go, I can't see the molecular. I really think that sometimes women are given these gifts genetically because they have to make a clean nest for their children. They have to make sure there's not bacteria and different things like that. I don't know. I could be wrong.
I don't know either.
We all work to be better, right?
Yes, we all can work to be better. Yeah. Yes, we can. It is not a zero-sum game here.
Yeah. I just think women are better than men. That's my opinion.
I don't think so. I don't think that at all.
I think you guys are better people than we are.
Well, I don't. But I think we all complete a puzzle. But if we allow the female nature to be as if we dignify it and make it as valid as the male, then we'll just help each other out. We'll become more whole, all of us.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
Correct.
So in the second part of your book, you get into power stories. And these are stories, I'll go through some of the titles here. The Old Story of Power, Women, Power in the Shadows, Scars, and Praise of Fathers, Doing Power Differently, the First Responders. There's something, I think, in French here, I won't bother trying killing. A Day Without War Metaphor and a Revolution of Values. Tell us a little bit about what you get into in the second part of your book.
Well, one of my sons went to a college called St. John's College, and it's this great book school. They read 100 books in the original languages for 4 years. That's all they do. And they call it the Dead White Man curriculum. And I went down into my basement one day, like when I start writing a book, I try to find every reason not to write the book, and cleaning. Now I'm going to contradict myself from our last conversation about cleaning toilets. Cleaning is something I love to do instead of writing. So the minute I start writing, I'm like, oh my God, must clean car, or must go in the basement and organize those boxes down there. So as I was starting to write this book, I went down in the basement so as not to write the book, and there was a box of books from my son's college, and it was a box filled with books about power and leadership, going all the way back to Sun Tzu in China, The Art of War, and Machiavelli, The Prince, all sorts of books, about 50 of them. And I started reading them in the basement. And I was shocked. I was amazed. I felt so naive because there was actually a method to the madness of male abuse of power. Like Machiavelli, it's better to be feared than to be loved. And every book had to do with war. Leadership and war were they were the same thing. It was all about domination, fear, win-lose, it could never just be win-win. It always was win-lose. And so I decided to make the whole second part of the book be about how these stories about what it means to be heroic and powerful, it's just one side of the coin. There are other ways to lead, to be powerful, to share power. So I go into lots of old stories about that.
And probably a lot of men should read that part as well, because there was another quote I think I saw in one of the videos I did research on from Machiavelli that wasn't very good towards women, if I recall rightly.
No, it was something like, fortune is like a woman, and in order to always gain your fortune, you must beat her. Something like that.
Wow.
And that was just
That's not
one.
cool.
But, of course we don't go around knowing that that's in us, but it's in us.
Yeah.
And it's good to read it and to think, oh, that's how we got into this mess. Okay, let's write some new stories about how power could be brokered. And I'm into, somebody needs to be leading, someone needs to be the authority. I'm not into chaos but there are ways to lead that don't involve the maxim, it's better to be feared than to be loved.
Yeah.
I think you can lead with love.
And I really think, we need to identify what you're talking about, where we don't live in this caveman medieval society anymore. We live in a world where we don't have to worry about women getting attacked by, like I said, people on horses and RVs and, stuff like this. We live in a very sanitized sort of life. And so it's time to address, and hopefully Me Too and your book and different other things that we could learn from, we'll kind of open our minds to start going, we've had some discussions on the show. Some authors have written about toxic masculinity, sexism, of course, et cetera, et cetera. And there are different things where we have to try and learn to balance what's going on inside men. There's lots of things that men can really learn: how to cry, how to be better in touch with their emotions. I think women are better in touch with their emotions. They're steeped more deeply in emotion than we.
But I just want to put a plug in for how hard it also is to be a man right now in these times. And I go into this a lot in the book about how we're all still functioning under these old stories. So women, we ask our men to be more sensitive, to be more talkative, to share the vulnerabilities. But we're still looking in many ways for our men to be strong warriors. And so we kind of screw with men's heads. It's be soft, be open, be kind, be communicative, be vulnerable. But it scares us, because we're still under the influence of men should always be strong, and men shouldn't cry, and men shouldn't show their weakness. I don't want you to be weak. I need you to be strong. So women have a lot of work to do too, if we want our men to be more balanced, and just like we want to be both strong and soft, they do too. We got to own up to the mixed messages we give and work on ourselves.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and that's the first time I've heard that from that perspective, and I'm learning from that. That's the challenge I always have as a man, because women always want you as their protector. You're the guy who moves her. If you're walking down the street, you move her from the street to the walk, so that you would get hit by the car first. A lot of this chauvinistic stuff. It's important that people like. But then, she wants you to show your feelings. But if you do, she might attack you for being weak sometimes.
Right.
And you're just like, wow, which way do you want it? But I think, like you say, everybody's got to work on this. So let me ask you this: the way a lot of these stories and narratives play, a lot of people don't think about, but I think also it plays in our male-dominant society, and like advertising. They talk about how especially young women are really affected by our advertising. Much of it's very sexist. Much of it puts forth this ideal woman that I think one time they tried to figure out if they could make a Barbie into a woman. It's not possible because
right. Anatomically impossible.
Yeah. But young girls grow up with this, and they see the advertising, they see these stories, and then they're left with this introspection. I think women are more introspective than we are. And one question I had for you is, and this came from watching a lot of your videos, and was I a long time recently, a few years ago, I became aware of self-ego and Eckhart Tolle, and it kind of saved me from the edge that I was on at the time.
Nice.
But I'm wondering now if women just aren't in more touch with their ego, and maybe that's why they suffer some more self-criticism. I don't know. I'm asking you that.
Yeah, well, there's a beautiful passage in Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, about women and the ego. You might want to go back and read it. It's so fascinating. I've done a lot of work with him. I helped Oprah produce a webinar that was watched by many, many millions of people with him and Oprah. Have you ever watched that conversation? It's really worth watching.
I'll look it up on
the... It's a 10-part series. So I've spent a lot of time in his work. And men and women suffer from over-identification with the ego. I mean, this is a whole other subject. If you want to have me on the show again, we can talk all about the ego, because the ego is fascinating to me. The ego being the part of us that feels we're either less than someone else or better than someone else, as opposed to the free self who knows, hey, Chris, you're just a guy trying to live a beautiful life. Me too. We're not that different. We're souls trying to live a decent, happy life. Like, the ego doesn't like that. The ego wants to feel special. I'm smarter than you. I'm buffer than you. I'm kinder than you. I'm an angel. You're blah, blah, blah. That ego keeps us separate from each other. And I think in women and men, that separation is somewhat different. Men feel separate because they got to be like the special guy. Like, look at the man at the top right now in the White House. He's a great example of a massive ego. Women often suffer from feeling less than and victimized. That's also the ego that can't kind of see the other person for what he or she is. So the ego is a great subject, and deep. It goes deep. I'm glad you liked Eckhart Tolle. I love him too.
Yeah, he saved me from the edge.
That's so great.
I know we're pressed for time, so I'm just trying to get your third part of the book.
Okay.
And I really like this too, because I've recommended it to some of my friends, meditation, some other things. And so you have a toolbox, which is a third part of your book, if you want to give us some insight to that.
Sure. Well, I've lived an interesting life in that I've always been really interested in changing culture. How does culture change, and activism? But I'm also a very introspective person, and I've studied a lot of meditation and other forms of change from within. So I think we can't really change the world unless we're also trying to change from within. The way Gandhi said, be the change. The people I admire the most are the people who are trying to be genuine in matching their own life to what they're preaching. So how we all get disgusted when, like, the minister or the priest is like saying one thing, be this moral high ground person, and then they're having sex with little boys. You're like, what? So I give tools in the book to help people be their best self, especially in the context of women being both strong and at the same time open and soft. So a lot of meditations I offer, a lot of ways of dealing with language in different ways, and just a way to kind of hone the instrument that we are so we can be noble, valiant human beings.
Awesome sauce. I know we're pressed for time, and I'd love to have you on again. I'd love to discuss this. There's so much we didn't discuss. I want to ask you about a few of the things, but give us your plugs again so people can find you on the internet.
Yeah, my website, which also has all my Facebook and stuff like that, is elizabethlesser.org. .org. Just go there, you'll find all the other stuff.
Check it out, guys. Cassandra speaks. When women are the storytellers, the human story changes. I couldn't agree more. We all need to get in touch with our softer side and just become more complete human beings and balance ourselves out. Thanks for being on the show, Elizabeth. We certainly appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. Truly, I enjoyed our conversation so much.
And be sure to check her out. You can also go to thecvpn.com to subscribe to online podcasts. You can go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, hit that bell notification to see the video version of this. See us on goodreads.com under Chris Voss, and also our new syndication, Amazon Music. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be safe. Register to vote, darn it. Get your butt out and vote, or mail in your ballot, whatever you got to do, just do it. So thanks so much for being here. Be safe. We'll see you next time.